and welcome to yet another episode about, well, I wasn't certain what subject I would go for. Um, I was thinking about the philosophical aspect of space. Most people thinking about space thinks about other space, of course, but I was more thinking about what space truly is. And you can think about it like an area or a place. Basically, you have one coordinate here, one coordinate here, one here, or maybe you have just an area. It can be a radius of a place. But most people think of space like the entire room. You have to also consider the height. And I've been thinking about that a lot because space needs to always have some form of room inside of it. It always have to have at least one atom or one electron in height to be called an actual space. And then the question is, what is that space really? And then we go back to other space or heavens and such, and we start thinking about where is that space? Is it always locked in a certain place? And technically, yes, but also technically no, because you have to think about the fact that the Earth is moving around the Sun, which means that the exact coordinates in the universe are constantly changing. Me just sitting here in this room, the coordinates for this room is constantly changing. So a space needs to be defined not by the actual coordinates, or maybe the coordinates by the Earth, but it can't be defined by universal codex in any way. Unless you make a universal codex that points out just the Earth and then you have special coordinates on the Earth. But then again, we do know that the magnetic flows of the Earth does move and change, and what is south may become north and vice versa. So we know that the coordinates always change. It's more like the place doesn't change. And when you think about that, it gets very philosophical, because then we're actually talking about the building. Or if you have a box and you have something inside the box, you would say it's inside the box, and that would be the space inside of the box that contains whatever you have placed in the box. But the box itself can be moved from one side of Earth to the other, or shut out into space. Or if the box is destroyed in the future, the space within the box has always existed. And I think that is when you come over to the concept that space actually is a special room in time that exists within a continuum that only exists there. It may be destroyed, or it may not have existed before you made a box. I find that very curious thinking, because a lot of times when you go back in your memories and you remembered, oh, I used to go to that place when I was a kid, down to the lake, and we always fished there or sunbathed or swam, whatever you did. That's actually, even if you go back to it years later, or when you revisited kindergarten that you used to attend, even though everything is familiar, everything is also so very much different. And I think it's really important to remember that when you think about spaces, places in the whole, that it's always changing. You can never truly relive a lost moment, but you can get reminded. And I find that very interesting to think about because space is truly unique in that way. You can never go back. The place will always change because the earth is spinning and we know it's moving around the sun, and we actually know the sun is just one of the many stars within the Milky Way galaxy, and they are all moving constantly around each other, spinning together with all the other galaxies, and basically the entire universe is most likely spinning. So even though we seem to think that everything is constant out there that we observe in outer space, it's actually not constant because it's always moving. And I think that's truly one of those really amazing things to ponder upon because you don't think about stuff like everything is moving. It's so nice sometimes to sit down and just be in the present and say, oh, I never want anything to change. But from the start of that sentence to the end of that sentence, you have moved loads and loads of kilometers, maybe miles in the universe. Everything just keeps moving no matter what you do. And that's why I think you should take a lot of time when you are on places and actually do enjoy and not sit there thinking like, oh, I wish it could last forever. Instead think, I wish I could be here again and experience this similar thing to this, because that's truly amazing. Space is amazing. It's a few coordinates set within some form of physical place that is constantly moving. And actually, you can think of your own body like one of those spaces because you actually live within your own body, and your body can be every place. And you've been a small child, and you're going to become a really old person in the future. But you're always going to live with inside your own body, and it's going to be very different. Maybe you'll be sick, maybe you get something broken, or even having surgery or having something amputated, who knows? Or maybe we've already gone through those things. But it's still the same coordinates, even though it's coordinates that kind of always move because you live inside your own body. And I usually think that it's not much you can do about the outside. You can try. You can try to think environmental friendly and ecological and be really nice, but you really need to think about the personal space, the only space you actually can truly own, and that's your own body and what you're doing to that space. Because that's the only place in the universe you actually have a real saying about. I mean, you can own a farm and you own a piece of farmland, and the question is how deep of that ground do you own? Are you allowed to dig a hole to the center of the sun? But if that is true and someone else has a farm someplace else on Earth and they dig to the center of Earth, do they own the center of the Earth? Just like you would. Most likely you don't own that much downwards. And that's why you should always think to not let out bad stuff into the environment, not even on your own ground, because you don't own the ground with under you. Just like you can't own the sky above your ground. Because if you own the sky above your land, you could decide, oh, no airplanes are allowed to fly here, and no birds and no bees, and it's just strange. And technically, if you think about Earth and you think like, oh, I own this piece of land here, you would own like a funnel, and you would own a certain part of the night sky. So you can't really own anything else in that way. It just gets strange if you would own everything in all directions, and that's why you really need to think of a space as a confined place that has a ceiling and roof, floor of some kind. And that's basically, well, it's a good description. It has sides. It has an end, that space. Space always has an end. That's a very interesting thought. Because there can't be endless space. Well, technically it can, but the space that you can own are never endless. And the only space you actually do own and have 100% saying about is your own body. Or well, you should have at least. I know some countries are very strange on some rules, what you are allowed and not. I think that's something that everyone needs to think about. Like your private space. Everyone are like, oh, you should have your private space. Yet there are some people that are okay with the idea that people should be forcibly vaccinated, or that you don't have a saying about if you want to get married, or there are people running around raping other people. They're actually invading private space. It's not okay to invade private space in any kind, in my version of reality, at least. Private space is private, and the rest of the spaces we do have rules about, because if you have a farm or you have a house in the suburbs or whatever, there's usually rules what you are allowed to do on your land, because it's still considered to be a collective space, even if you do own a part of it. Technically, you don't own all of it. You can't open up industrial producing building or something that lets out a lot of strange smells in the area without actually asking first. Or opening up a water park in your back garden and there's loads of noise levels coming from that when you get visitors. There's rules to the community as a whole, what you are allowed to do with space. But your own private space, I think we all need to learn to respect people's private space. If someone wants to get tattoos, they should be allowed to. If someone wants to have piercings, they should be allowed to. Still, we can be nice and tell them, well, maybe you should try taking care of your health better. If they need to. If they're eating too little or eating too much, or we can be helpful. Bad habits are not good habits. But we also need to admit that we actually don't have any real saying about other people's private space. It's like thinking of if you have kids, you know, they have their own room and they probably some part in their life in their teenage years they will have a sign on the door saying do not enter, and you need to kind of respect that. But at the same time, space is so much more than just your own body. And we need to think about that, the communal parts of space. Because it's not fine that one person does something to affect the environment for thousands of other people, or thousands of other wildlife for that matter. I think thinking about the different versions of space that exists are very interesting. A few years ago I was studying outer space at a university, and we were talking, and the teacher said that there are as much trash, you know, broken down satellites and broken down space pods and stuff in the air falling around Earth as big as the moon. But that's actually communal space. I don't know if I think it's okay that we have a huge trail of trash floating around our planet. And I don't think if anyone should think that is okay. I wish everyone would think a little bit more about the communal spaces. Personally, I plant flowers and trees because that is one way I can help. Another way is to never throw away things into nature. I mean, I'm a smoker, but I don't throw away I don't know the English word, the leftover filter parts. I don't throw them in the nature. You should always consider what you're doing to the places that are not yours. In whatever way you can. Because the only place you truly own is your own body. The rest of space, let's call it endless space, it's communal. So have a think, ponder upon it a bit. What spaces, what different kind of spaces exists around you, and think what you can do to make life not just better for you, but also for others. If everyone did that, well, as the Mayans put it in 2012, or well, in the past, but they said it would end at 2012, they'd say life as we know it would end. And studying upon it a lot, well, I read someplace, I'm not certain it's true or something, but I read that the first visitors in the place where the coronavirus originated from actually came there in 2012. And maybe life as we know it is ending. But that does not mean that the space ceased to exist. And it may take a lot of time, but let's build something beautiful, something really beautiful upon it. And let life as we knew it in the past, and let's build a better future, and let the space that we do have that is communal be the best of space. That's anyway how I think upon space, as a place that you move around in, and you can either leave it better or worse than when you entered it. Because space is not just a place locked in time, it's a place that moves through a continued stream of time that moves through the entire universe. And I much rather leave a trail of good than a trail of trash.